the battles to what Fidel Castro commended us and asked for. These are the struggles that we are leading and that we are continue to give to the future. We have achieved a lot with his leadership, with his solidarity to our eternal commander Hugo Chávez, to whom we remember as well. We cannot speak of Fidel without speaking of Chávez at the same time, because together they built what no one thought was possible. As we were saying, when everyone had said the history was done, and very early in his personal life, we listened to Fidel, especially in that decade at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, when the initiatives, the patriotic and liberation initiatives were starting, and we were starting to understand, and also a dark veil was veiled, and they were trying to impose this idea that the peoples had been defeated and that liberalism was the only victorious option. And as we listened before, there was only one voice in the world that was able, even before this happened, to warn on what was happening, what was coming, and how we should deal with that situation. That, without a doubt, led a process in Venezuela of our Bolivarian revolution. Yesterday, President Nicolás Maduro narrated in the framework of the celebration his encounter, his early encounter with Commander Fidel Castro here in Caracas, when we were just 20 days, 25 days away from that event, that historical event, and regretful as well, of the Caracazo, February 27th, 28th, March 1st of 1989. Less than 1 month before of that, Fidel was here in Venezuela. And within the lies of the far right were the idea that Fidel had been here to mount and to contribute to that popular rebellion in our country, that he had been here in order to lead, to conspire for that rebellion with the popular movements that were part of that social explosion of the Caracazo. But what our President Nicolás Maduro was saying yesterday is that what Fidel saw in the eyes of the youth was what was coming for Venezuela. He identified that. He could perceive that in such a live way. That was his great capacity, extraordinary capacity that he had, the commander-in-chief, of being ahead of his time, of the event. And he saw even further down the road. And he knew, because we need to say it as well, from very early on, Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro, even before the Cuban Revolution, they knew of the role of Venezuela in this liberation process in Latin America, because of its Bolivarian history, because of its geopolitical position, for its education, and the great deeds that happened in parallel to the Cuban Revolution in order to defeat the regime of Pérez Jiménez, that happened by revolutionary forces that were then betrayed by an elite that had been bought by Washington. Here is our comrade El Gallo from the Communist Party of Venezuela, who was here. He led the mobilization, the trade unions, the student movement, and farmers and agricultural movement. That was in the 50s. And that is why when the commander Fidel Castro came just days before, yesterday our ambassador Germán Sánchez Otero said when he came that was a revolution, because this was a revolutionary Venezuela that then had the role and was assigned the role of countering the Cuban Revolution, but that was an artificial role because the Venezuelan people was always part of that Cuban Revolution. 40 years later, when Fidel came to Caracas, he saw in the eyes of the youth, in the eyes of those who now are leading this revolution, President Nicolás Maduro, he saw in those eyes what was coming for Venezuela. But he also saw this in the rebellion of those young army men who in 92, as a consequence of that popular rebellion of 89, they raised in arms against that dictatorship, against that regime, that oppression regime, sellout government that had been installed here against the will, political will and spirit of the Venezuelan people. And we need to say this. In the continent, only in Venezuela we understood how that military force was really a force that was very much near the people. And the friends of the Latin American left, they had doubts and they hesitated because of the past of the military actions and dictatorships in the South specifically. They doubted Commander Chávez and that military youth. But once again, the commander Fidel, he didn't hesitate for a second. President Maduro always said that one asked, what did Fidel say? What did Fidel think? In Venezuela, we always thought, what would Fidel think? And in that moment, Fidel traced the road, and he saw in that movement that was being born in the military youth, he was able to see and know what was coming and know what Commander Chávez meant and to move forward in a direction. That is why he received him just in the moment that he came out of prison in 1994. In an extraordinary manner, he appeared there right outside the plane, and he received Commander Chávez in that historical visit to Cuba that marked